Hello, friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, in which we talk about manipulation and disinformation by the Kremlin media. In the Russian program Big Game, on August 11, 2025, the main focus is on the upcoming summit between Putin and Trump, which is scheduled for August 15th in Alaska. The Russian presentation is extremely solemn. This is not just a meeting of two leaders, but a historic breakthrough and a symbol of qualitative change in Russian-American relations. But behind this rhetoric are important political signals that should be considered soberly. History and symbolism as a tool of legitimization. Russian speakers emphasize that Alaska is the closest U.S. state to Russia and a former territory of the Russian Empire. This historical context is played up as an element of Russia's return to big politics. At the same time, it is emphasized that the meeting will take place on American soil. And the very fact of Putin's visit to the United States is presented as a victory for the Kremlin over its previous policy of isolation. The choice of location has another meaning. Alaska is far from Ukraine and Europe, which in the rhetoric of the broadcast is presented as a symbol of a purely bilateral format. The Kremlin is deliberately cutting off Kiev and Brussels from the negotiating table, turning the conflict into a topic of behind-the-scenes agreements between Moscow and Washington. Marginalization of Ukraine and Europe. The broadcast repeatedly repeats, there will be no meeting with Zelensky before the negotiations between Putin and Trump. Europe and Ukraine are hysterical because they are excluded from the process. Zelensky, according to the hosts, will receive the result post factum, with an offer to simply sign. This builds a dangerous logic. The fate of the war is decided not with the participation of the victim of aggression, but in a dialogue between the aggressor and the superpower, whose interests are not identical to the interests of Ukraine or the EU. Rejection of diplomacy through force, in an interpretation favorable to the Kremlin propaganda, presents Trump's position as a departure from the Biden approach, which allegedly made negotiations with Russia dependent on its concessions. In return, normal diplomacy is proposed, that is, a willingness to discuss the Ukrainian issue without preconditions, including territorial ones. There are hints of a roadmap for the settlement, the starting point of which will be the Russian memorandum with the known demands for recognition of the annexation. In fact, we are talking about consolidating territorial seizures in exchange for a formal ceasefire. With whom should they trade? With whom should they not trade? I would like to draw attention to the following thing. Throughout July, Trump said that he was disappointed with the negotiations with Putin, that they were not bringing anything, and so on and so forth. He threatened to introduce anti-Russian sanctions, both primary and secondary. And he threatened to introduce 100% protective duties on those countries that import mainly Russian oil, that is, China and India. And this is what I would like to draw special attention to. The sharp change in Trump's rhetoric and position and Witkoff's visit to Moscow last week occurred precisely after the United States received a harsh and abrupt refusal from China and India regarding restrictions on cooperation with Russia. And it seems to me that the refusal from India, which they considered their preferential partner in the Pacific region, was especially painful for the United States. But instead of going along with the United States, India took a categorically tough position that it would not limit relations with Russia, that it would not allow other countries in the great power to dictate to it with whom it should trade and with whom it should not trade. For the EU, such statements are an alarming signal. 1. A Yalta II precedent is being formed, where decisions are made without the European states directly affected by the conflict. 2. Ukraine is effectively being pushed out of the negotiation process and risks being faced with the fact of a deal favorable to Moscow. 3. Alaska's symbolism is used for domestic audiences, but its real purpose is to show the West that Russia is returning to the table as an equal partner of the U.S. Think, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled.